I pretended to be poor my whole life. My children were ashamed of me and rarely visited. On my 50th birthday, I announced that I would give away my fortune of $50 million. When I said to whom, it went silent in the room, and their faces turned pale. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. For 30 years, I lived in the same modest apartment in Queens. The wallpaper was yellowing, the furniture was secondhand, and my car was a 1998 Honda Civic that coughed every time I turned the ignition. My neighbors knew me as Margaret Chen, the quiet woman who worked double shifts at the hospital laundry and clipped coupons from Sunday papers. What they didn't know was that I had $50 million sitting in carefully managed investment accounts. My late husband, Robert, had been a brilliant software engineer who got in early with a startup that eventually sold to Microsoft. When he died of a heart attack at 45, he left me with more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But Robert had also left me with a warning, whispered during our last coherent conversation in the ICU. "Don't let them know about the money, Maggie," he'd said, his grip weak on my hand. "Let them choose who they want to be first." He meant our children. Daniel, who was 20 then, and Jessica, who was 18. I followed his advice. I took a job I didn't need, lived in an apartment I could have left, and watched my children grow into adults who slowly, methodically, began to drift away. At first I told myself it was natural. Young people needed space to build their lives. Daniel went to law school, married a woman named Veronica, who wore designer suits and wrinkled her nose at my shabby furniture. Jessica became a marketing executive, married a finance broker named Todd who talked constantly about optimizing assets and lifestyle goals. But the visits became shorter, then less frequent. "Mom, we're so busy," Daniel would say during our brief phone calls. "The firm is demanding and Veronica's pregnant again." I met my grandchildren at carefully orchestrated gatherings, birthday parties at their houses, where I felt like an embarrassing guest who'd shown up in the wrong clothes, which I had deliberately. My worn coat and outdated shoes made Veronica physically uncomfortable. I watched her guide her children away from me, as if poverty were contagious. Jessica was more direct. "Mother, couldn't you at least try to look presentable?" She'd hissed at me during Thanksgiving 2 years ago. "Todd's parents are here. What will they think?" What wounded me most wasn't the shame they felt. It was the absence of curiosity. Neither of them ever asked why I lived the way I did. Neither wondered if I needed help, or if I was happy, or what I did with my time besides work. They simply wrote me off as a failure, an embarrassment, a reminder of where they'd come from and how far they'd climbed. The truly painful moments came in small doses. Daniel forgetting to invite me to his eldest daughter's baptism. Jessica lying about a family vacation, posting photos on Facebook while claiming she'd told me about it. The birthday cards that arrived late or not at all, with generic messages that could have been written to anyone. I kept working at the hospital laundry. I kept my investments private, managed through a discreet financial advisor in Manhattan, and I kept a detailed mental record of who actually cared about me. There was Maria, the young single mother who lived next door, struggling with 2 jobs and a special needs son. I'd been helping her quietly for years, covering her rent when she was short, paying for her son's therapy sessions, never asking for anything in return. There was James, the elderly veteran from the apartment below mine, who brought me soup when I had the flu and spent hours talking with me about old movies and the wife he'd lost. There was Linda, my supervisor at the hospital, who'd been advocating for better wages for workers like us, fighting management even when it risked her own position. These were the people who saw me as a person, not as an inconvenience or a disappointment. As my 50th birthday approached, Daniel's secretary called me. not Daniel himself, his secretary. Mr. Chen wanted me to inform you that there will be a small family gathering for your birthday, she said in a professional, detached voice. Saturday, November 12th at 6 p.m. at his residence. Please confirm your attendance. I almost laughed. After months of minimal contact, they were throwing me a party. How generous. But I confirmed, because I'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. I spent the week before my birthday making arrangements with my attorney. Everything needed to be perfect, documented, legally airtight. On the morning of the party, I dressed in my usual modest clothes. A simple dress from Target, worn flats, my old winter coat. When I arrived at Daniel's house in Westchester, Veronica's expression confirmed everything I needed to know. That slight curl of her lip, that quick glance at my shoes. She kissed my cheek without warmth. "So glad you could make it, Margaret," she said. Never Mom, always Margaret. The house was full of people I barely knew. Daniel's colleagues, Jessica's friends, Todd's business associates. My children had turned my birthday into a networking opportunity. As I sat at the dinner table, watching them laugh and toast and ignore me, something cold and clear settled in my chest. It was time. When Daniel stood to make a speech, something about family and gratitude that rang hollow in his mouth, I stood up beside him. "I have an announcement," I said. The room fell quiet. "I have an announcement," I said, my voice carrying across Daniel's expensive dining room. I could see the confusion on their faces. When did I ever interrupt anything? When did quiet, poor Margaret ever demand attention? Daniel's smile froze. Jessica's hand paused halfway to her wine glass. Veronica and Todd exchanged glances that clearly said, "Please don't let her embarrass us." "I know I've been living modestly all these years," I continued. "I know that's been difficult for some of you." I watched Jessica's cheeks flush. Good. Let her feel uncomfortable for once. "But there's something I need to tell you all. Something I've kept private for 30 years. I reached into my purse and pulled out a document my attorney had prepared. "I'm not poor. I never was. When your father died, Daniel and Jessica, he left us very well provided for, $50 million to be exact." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. Daniel's face went white, then red. "What?" $50 million, I repeated calmly, "currently held in various investment accounts and trusts. And now that I'm 50 years old, I've decided it's time to distribute that wealth." I watched the transformation happen in real time, the shock giving way to calculation, the calculation giving way to greed. Veronica grabbed Daniel's arm. Todd leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "Mom," Jessica said, her voice suddenly warm, suddenly soft. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because your father asked me not to," I said. "He wanted to see who you'd become without the influence of money, and now I have." Jessica stood up, moving toward me with her arms extended. "Mother, I don't understand. All these years you were struggling, and we didn't know we could help you." "I wasn't struggling," I said quietly. "I was watching." The warmth drained from her face. Daniel found his voice. "So you're saying you've had $50 million this entire time? While living in that apartment? Working at the hospital?" "Yes." "That's insane," Veronica muttered. Then louder, "Margaret, that's actually insane. Who does that?" "Someone who wanted to know the truth about her family," I said. I could see them recalibrating. Every missed visit, every dismissive comment, every time they'd treated me like an embarrassment. It was all playing back in their minds, and now they understood what it might have cost them. Todd was the first to recover, his salesman's instincts kicking in. "Well, this is wonderful news. Margaret, we should sit down, talk about estate planning, wealth management strategies." "Oh, I've already done all that," I said. "In fact, that's what I wanted to announce tonight. I've decided to give away my entire fortune." The room erupted, everyone talking at once. Daniel saying, "Of course, that's your right," while his eyes said something very different. Jessica asking who would receive it, her voice tight with panic. I held up my hand for silence. "I'll be announcing the beneficiaries tomorrow," I said. "At my attorney's office. You're all welcome to attend if you'd like. 10 a.m. Madison Avenue." Then I gathered my coat and my purse, and I left my own birthday party. The drive back to Queens took an hour. My hands shook on the steering wheel. What had I done? I just detonated a bomb in the middle of my family, and I had no idea what the fallout would be. When I got home, Maria was in the hallway struggling with grocery bags and a sleeping child. I helped her carry everything inside, my mind still spinning. "You okay, Miss Margaret?" Maria asked, noticing my expression. "You look upset." "Just family drama," I said. She laughed softly. "I know that feeling. My sister won't talk to me because I wouldn't lie to her boyfriend about where she was last Tuesday." She shook her head. "Family's supposed to be there for you, you know? Not make your life harder." After I left her apartment, I sat in mine staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 5 from Jessica, 7 text messages, each more frantic than the last. "Mom, we need to talk." "Mother, please call me back." "Margaret, this is serious. We deserve to discuss this as a family." I turned my phone off. The plan I'd formed wasn't complicated, but it required courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Tomorrow, at my attorney's office, I would announce that my $50 million would be divided equally among 3 people: Maria, James, and Linda. The people who'd treated me with genuine kindness, who'd seen me as a human being rather than an obligation or an embarrassment. My children would get nothing, but sitting there in my quiet apartment, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. Daniel and Jessica were still my children. I'd raised them. I'd loved them. Didn't I owe them something? Then I remembered Jessica's face when she'd asked me to leave her house before Todd's parents arrived. I remembered Daniel's secretary calling instead of him. I remembered 30 years of feeling invisible. No, I didn't owe them my money. I'd given them my love, my time, my presence. They'd rejected all of it. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what that rejection had cost them. I just had to be strong enough to follow through. I arrived at my attorney's office at 9:30, half an hour early. David Brennan had been Robert's friend and advisor for 20 years, and when Robert died, he'd helped me structure my finances exactly as my husband had wanted, quietly, carefully, and completely privately. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Margaret?" David asked as we reviewed the documents one final time. "Once you make this announcement, there's no walking it back. Your children will—" "I know what they'll do," I said. "That's why I'm here." The conference room had windows overlooking Madison Avenue. I watched the morning crowds rushing past, everyone absorbed in their own urgent business. At precisely 10 o'clock, the receptionist opened the door. "Your family is here." Daniel walked in first, wearing his most expensive suit. Veronica was beside him, dressed like she was attending a board meeting. Jessica followed with Todd, both of them projecting an air of forced casualness that didn't match the tension in their shoulders. "Mother," Daniel said, kissing my cheek. The warmth was so obviously manufactured that it made my skin crawl. "We're glad you're taking this seriously. Family decisions like this require careful consideration." "Sit down," David said, gesturing to the chairs across from us. For the next 10 minutes, David outlined the legal structure of my estate. The investments, the trusts, the real estate holdings I'd accumulated over 30 years. With each revelation, I watched my children's eyes grow wider. They hadn't truly understood the scope of what I possessed. $50 million was abstract. But when David listed the properties, the stock portfolios, the municipal bonds, when he quantified everything in concrete terms, it became real. "So," Daniel said when David finished, "let's talk about distribution. Obviously, Jessica and I would be the primary beneficiaries, but we should discuss tax implications, trust structures. You're not beneficiaries at all, I said. The room went still. I'm sorry? Jessica's voice was very small. I'm leaving nothing to either of you, I said. The entire estate will be divided equally among 3 individuals. Maria Rodriguez, my neighbor who's been a truer daughter to me than you ever were. James Patterson, a veteran who's shown me more kindness than you've shown in decades. And Linda Washington, who's demonstrated more integrity in her work than you've shown in your entire lives. Veronica stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is insane. These are strangers. They're not strangers to me, I said quietly. They're my friends, my real family. We're your real family. Jessica's voice cracked. Mom, you can't do this. We're your children. You're people who happen to share my DNA, I said. But you stopped being my family a long time ago. Todd tried a different approach. Margaret, think about this rationally. Those people haven't earned this money. You don't owe them anything. And I owe you something? I looked at him directly. You, who told your friends I was Daniel's live-in maid because you were embarrassed to admit I was his mother-in-law? His face went red. Mother, please, Daniel said. If we've been distant, it's because we didn't understand your situation. We thought you wanted to live modestly. We were respecting your choices. Really? I pulled out my phone. I'd prepared for this. Is that why you told your daughter Emma that she didn't need to make me a Mother's Day card because Grandma wouldn't appreciate it anyway? Daniel's face went pale. How did you... Emma told me herself, I said. Last month when I took her for ice cream. The one time you actually let me spend time with her unsupervised. She asked me why you and Aunt Jessica don't like me very much. The silence was deafening. Your 5-year-old granddaughter can see what you're pretending doesn't exist, I continued. She knows you're ashamed of me. She's confused by it because she thinks I'm nice. But she's learning from you that money matters more than kindness. That's not fair, Jessica whispered. Fair? I felt something cold settle in my chest. When has fairness ever entered into our relationship? Was it fair when you uninvited me from your wedding rehearsal dinner because I didn't fit the aesthetic? Was it fair when Daniel forgot my birthday 3 years in a row? Those were mistakes, Daniel said desperately. We can do better. We will do better. No, David interjected smoothly. The documents are signed. Mrs. Chen has made her decision. This meeting is simply a courtesy to inform you of her intentions. I stood up. The formal announcement will be made in 3 days. My beneficiaries will be contacted by Mr. Brennan's office. You're free to contest the will if you'd like, but I assure you, everything is legally sound. As I walked toward the door, Jessica grabbed my arm. Mom, please don't do this. We need that money. Todd's firm is going through restructuring and our mortgage, and there it was. The first truly honest thing she'd said to me in years. You need the money, I repeated. Not me, not a relationship with me, just the money. Her grip loosened. I left them there in that conference room with David patiently explaining that there was nothing they could do to change my mind. When I reached the street, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma sent from Daniel's phone. Grandma, can I come visit you? I miss you. But the message had been deleted within seconds. Then another text appeared. This time in Daniel's words. Do not contact our children directly. We need space to process this situation. I had my proof. Even now, even knowing what they stood to lose, their first instinct was to cut me off from my granddaughter. They'd chosen money over love before they'd even received their answer. The formal announcement happened 3 days later, exactly as I'd planned. David's office sent out the official documentation to Maria, James, and Linda, informing them of their unexpected inheritance. Simultaneously, he filed the revised estate documents with the appropriate authorities. Maria called me at noon, crying so hard she could barely speak. Miss Margaret, I don't understand. This must be a mistake. $16 million. That's not... I can't... It's real, I said gently. You've been kinder to me than my own children, Maria. You've earned this. But I didn't do anything special. You're my friend. I care about you. Exactly, I said. James came to my door that evening, tears streaming down his weathered face. He held the documents in shaking hands. Margaret, I can't accept this. This is your family's money. You are my family, James, more than they ever were. Linda's reaction was different. When I called her, she was silent for a long moment. Then, are you sure, Margaret? Your kids are going to come after you hard for this. I know. And you're ready for that? I think so, I said. Well then, I could hear the smile in her voice. I've got your back, whatever happens. What happened came faster than I expected. That night, around 9 p.m., someone started pounding on my apartment door. Heavy, aggressive thuds that made my pictures rattle on the walls. Mom, open this door, Daniel's voice, angrier than I'd ever heard it. I looked through the peephole. Daniel, Veronica, Jessica, and Todd stood in my hallway. Daniel's face was flushed red. Veronica had her phone out, recording. I opened the door but kept the chain locked. It's late. You've lost your mind, Veronica said immediately. We're going to have you declared mentally incompetent. This is clearly evidence of dementia or diminished capacity. I'm 50 years old and in perfect health, I said calmly. My attorney has documentation from 3 independent physicians confirming my mental competence. You're welcome to try, but you'll fail. Todd pushed forward. Margaret, be reasonable. Those people are manipulating you. That neighbor of yours probably pretended to be your friend just to get access to your money. Maria didn't know I had money, I said. None of them did. That's the point. Jessica tried a softer approach, her eyes wet with tears. Mom, I know we haven't been perfect children, but we love you. We want to make things right. Please give us a chance. I gave you 30 years of chances, I said. Every time you missed my birthday, I gave you another chance. Every time you made me feel small, I gave you another chance. I'm done giving chances. You spiteful bitch, Veronica spat. This is what this is really about, isn't it? You're punishing us because we didn't fawn over you enough. You're holding your money hostage because your feelings got hurt. Veronica! Daniel grabbed her arm, but the damage was done. No, let her speak, I said quietly. Let's hear what she really thinks. Veronica's face twisted with rage. You want to know what I think? I think you're a sad, pathetic woman who's so desperate for attention that you're willing to destroy your own family to get it. Those people don't care about you. They're laughing at how easily they conned you. You're giving away $50 million to strangers because you're too proud to admit that maybe, just maybe, you weren't the perfect mother you think you were. The hallway had gone silent. I could see Maria's door across the way, slightly ajar. She was listening. Are you finished? I asked. We're going to fight this, Daniel said, his voice low and threatening. Every step of the way. We'll tie this up in court for years. We'll expose those people for the con artists they are. We'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing. Go ahead, I said. Make this public. Let everyone know that you ignored your mother for 30 years and only cared about her when you found out she was rich. I'm sure that'll reflect wonderfully on Daniel's law practice and Jessica's marketing firm. That stopped them. You wouldn't, Jessica breathed. Try me, I said. I have documentation of everything, every missed visit, every dismissive comment, every time you excluded me from family events. David has compiled a timeline that makes for very compelling reading. Would you like the media to see it? They stood there trapped between rage and calculation. Finally, Todd pulled Jessica back. Come on, we're not accomplishing anything here. As they retreated down the hallway, Veronica turned back. You're going to regret this. You're going to die alone, old woman. with no family, surrounded by people who only pretended to care about you for money. At least they pretended, I said quietly. You couldn't even manage that. After they left, I closed the door and sank against it, my whole body shaking. Maria emerged from her apartment, her face pale. Miss Margaret. I'm okay, I said, but I wasn't. My heart was racing, my hands trembling. The venom in Veronica's voice had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Come stay with me tonight, Maria said. You shouldn't be alone. I spent that night on Maria's couch, listening to her son's soft breathing from the bedroom, grateful for the simple warmth of human kindness. Over the next few days, I unplugged my phone and declined to answer my door. I needed time to recover from that confrontation, to rebuild my strength. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Now I needed to prepare for their next move. A week passed in relative quiet, which should have been my first warning. Daniel and Jessica weren't the type to give up easily, especially not when this much money was at stake. The temptation came on a Tuesday morning, delivered via certified mail. Inside the envelope was a professionally printed booklet, maybe 20 pages long, with glossy photos and careful layout. The title read, The Chen Family Legacy, a proposal for generational wealth. I sat at my kitchen table and read through it, my coffee growing cold beside me. They'd thought of everything. Tax-advantaged trusts for my grandchildren's education, charitable foundations that would bear my name, investment strategies that would honor Robert's memory by ensuring his hard work benefits his descendants. There were photos of Emma and her younger brother, of Jessica's twin boys, all smiling innocently from the pages. The message was clear: give us the money and we'll let you be part of their lives. At the end was a handwritten note from Daniel. Mom, we've all had time to cool down and think clearly. This proposal represents a fair compromise that honors everyone's interests. Let's meet for lunch this Saturday at the Palm Court. Just you, me, and Jessica. No spouses. We can talk like a family. Please give us this chance. Daniel. I stared at those words for a long time. The Palm Court. The Plaza Hotel. Robert had proposed to me there 35 years ago. Daniel knew that. He was deliberately choosing that location to manipulate my emotions. I called David Brennan. They've sent a proposal, I said. Very professional, very calculated. Are you wavering? His voice was neutral, non-judgmental. No, I said, and realized it was true. I'm angry. They think they can buy back my affection with a glossy brochure and some strategic photos of my grandchildren. Good, David said. Stay angry. Anger will keep you focused. I didn't respond to Daniel's invitation. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I reached out to the people who actually mattered to me. That Saturday, instead of meeting my children at the plaza, I invited Maria, James, and Linda to my apartment for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, wine from a box, and the kind of easy conversation I'd been starving for. Have you heard from your kids again? Linda asked. She was a direct woman who didn't believe in dancing around difficult subjects. They sent a proposal, very businesslike. Lots of talk about family legacy and generational wealth. James snorted. That's what they call it now? When I was young, we just called it greed. They used pictures of my grandchildren, I said quietly. They know that's my weakness. Maria reached across the table and took my hand. Miss Margaret, can I tell you something? Before I knew about any of this money, you used to babysit Carlos when I had to work double shifts. You never asked for anything. You just helped. Because you're good. She's right, Linda said. Last year, when management tried to cut our health benefits, you were the one who helped me organize the petition. You didn't have to do that. You weren't even affected. You had your own insurance. But you did it anyway because it was right. And you listen, James added. When I told you about my wife, about losing her, you didn't try to fix it or give advice. You just sat with me. Do you know how rare that is? I felt tears prickling at my eyes. "What I'm saying is," Maria continued, "those kids of yours, they think love is something you buy, something you negotiate. But you taught me different. Love is showing up. Love is being there when it's inconvenient. Love is giving without expecting anything back. You three are the best thing that's happened to me in decades," I said. "Well," Linda raised her wine glass, "here's to actual family, the kind you choose." We toasted, and for the first time in weeks, I felt genuine peace. But peace was short-lived. On Monday, Daniel called from a blocked number, catching me off guard. "Mom, please don't hang up." His voice was soft, almost gentle. This was a different tactic. "We got your silence about Saturday. We understand you're still angry. But I want you to know, Veronica is sorry. She was out of line at your apartment. Stress makes people say things they don't mean." I said nothing. "The thing is," Daniel continued, "we've been doing a lot of thinking. Jessica and I, about our childhood, about Dad, about the choices we've made. We want to do better. We want to rebuild our relationship with you, regardless of the money." "Regardless of the money," I repeated. "Yes, even if you give every penny away, we want to be part of your life again. We want you to know your grandchildren. We want to fix this." "That's interesting," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Because 3 weeks ago, you had your secretary call me about my birthday party. You couldn't even dial the phone yourself. I know that was wrong. But people can change, Mom. We can change." "Can you?" "Yes, we're trying. Just think about it. Please. We're going to back off, give you space, let you process everything, but we hope you'll give us a chance to prove ourselves." After he hung up, I sat very still. They were retreating, but not surrendering. They were regrouping, planning their next move. I needed to be ready. James knocked on my door an hour later. "Saw your light on. You okay?" "They're not giving up," I said. "Didn't expect they would," he replied. $50 million is a powerful motivator, but so is having people who actually give a damn about you." He smiled. "You're not alone in this, Margaret. Remember that." I did remember, and that knowledge gave me strength. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. 2 weeks of silence followed Daniel's phone call. I almost started to believe they'd actually backed off, that maybe their retreat was genuine. Then came Thanksgiving. Jessica called on Monday of that week, her voice warm and bright. "Mother, I know this is last minute, but Todd and I would love to have you for Thanksgiving dinner. Just immediate family. The boys have been asking about their grandmother." Something in my chest twisted. My grandsons. I'd barely seen them since they were toddlers. "Jessica, I don't think—" "Please, Mom, no ulterior motives, no pressure. We just want to spend the holiday with you. Isn't that what you wanted? For us to include you?" She had me there. It was exactly what I'd wanted for years. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Jessica's house in Scarsdale was decorated like something from a magazine. Fall wreaths, expensive centerpieces, everything coordinated in tasteful autumn tones. When I arrived carrying a simple apple pie I'd made myself, Jessica embraced me at the door. "Mom, I'm so glad you came." Daniel was already there with his family. Even Veronica managed a tight smile. "Margaret, good to see you." The afternoon started pleasantly enough. My grandchildren were polite, if distant. Emma, Daniel's daughter, showed me a drawing she'd made at school. Jessica's twins demonstrated their new video game. For a brief, painful moment, I let myself imagine this was real. Then, after dinner, Todd suggested the adults have coffee in the living room while the kids watched a movie. That's when everything changed. We settled into the expensive furniture, and I noticed that I was effectively surrounded. Daniel and Veronica on one couch, Jessica and Todd on the other, me in the armchair between them. No accident. "Mom," Daniel began, his voice reasonable and calm, "we've spent the last few weeks really examining our behavior. We've talked to a family therapist." "A therapist?" I raised my eyebrows. "Yes. We wanted professional guidance on how to repair our relationship with you." Jessica leaned forward earnestly. She helped us understand how our actions must have hurt you, how we took you for granted. "And," I kept my voice neutral, "and we want to make amends," Daniel said. "Real amends, not just words." Todd pulled out a folder. "We've drawn up a plan. Starting January, we'd like to institute regular family dinners. Once a month, rotating houses. The children spend one weekend a month with you. We help you move to a nicer apartment." "I don't want a nicer apartment." "Or you could move closer to us," Jessica interjected smoothly. "There's a lovely condo complex near me. You'd be near your grandchildren. We could see you all the time." I looked at each of them carefully. Their expressions were earnest, their postures open and inviting. They'd rehearsed this. "This all sounds wonderful," I said slowly, "but it doesn't address the actual problem." "What problem?" Veronica asked too quickly. "The money," I said flatly. "This is all still about the money." "No!" Jessica's protest was immediate and forceful. "Mother, you're being cynical. We're trying to rebuild our family by offering me exactly what I've wanted for years, at exactly the moment when you stand to lose $50 million. I set down my coffee cup. "You really think I can't see the pattern?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Margaret, that's unfair," Todd said. His voice had an edge now. "We're making a genuine effort here." "Are you?" I looked at him directly. "Tell me, Todd, if I had announced I was giving all my money to you and Jessica instead of to strangers, would we be having this conversation? Would there be family dinners and therapy sessions?" "That's a false equivalency," Daniel said, slipping into his lawyer voice. "Obviously, we would have been happy about the inheritance, but that doesn't negate our desire to improve our relationship." "Stop it." My voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop. I've listened to you for 30 minutes and you haven't said one true thing." Veronica stood abruptly. "You know what? I was willing to play nice. I was willing to sit here and pretend like this wasn't all your ego trip. But you clearly don't want reconciliation. You want to punish us." "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm simply choosing not to reward you for treating me like garbage for 30 years. "We didn't treat you like garbage," Jessica's voice rose. "We had busy lives. We had our own families to take care of. Did you ever think that maybe your constant martyrdom was exhausting? Maybe we stayed away because you were always guilt-tripping us?" There it was, the truth, finally leaking through the cracks. "I guilt-tripped you?" I said softly. "By existing? By being poor? By embarrassing you?" "By refusing to help yourself," Daniel exploded. "For 30 goddamn years, you lived like a pauper when you were sitting on millions. Do you know how that made us look? People thought we weren't taking care of our own mother. So that's what this is really about," I said. "Your reputation." "It's about family," Jessica shouted. "It's about not giving our family's money to strangers who don't deserve it." "And there it is," I said, standing up. "That's what you really think, that Maria doesn't deserve it because she cleans houses, that James doesn't deserve it because he's just an old veteran, that Linda doesn't deserve it because she's a hospital supervisor." "They're not your children." Veronica's face was flushed red. "We are. That money should stay in this family." "They are my family," I said clearly. "More than you ever were." The silence that followed was venomous. Todd recovered first, his salesman mask sliding back into place. "Margaret, you're upset. We've clearly pushed too hard. Why don't we all take a breath?" "I'm leaving," I said. "Mom, wait." Jessica grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "You don't get to just walk away. We're your children. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I said, pulling free. I gave you life. I gave you love. I gave you every opportunity. What you did with that was your choice. As I gathered my coat, I could feel their eyes on me, calculating, furious, desperate. You're making a mistake, Daniel said quietly. Those people are using you. Maybe, I said, but at least they were kind while they did it. I left them there, in that perfect house, with their perfect decorations and their imperfect hearts. Outside, my hand shook as I unlocked my car. Fear coursed through me, real fear, because I'd just seen the full extent of their desperation. They weren't going to give up. They were going to escalate. But as I drove back to Queens, that fear transformed into something else, something harder and colder. Resolution. They'd had one last chance to be honest with me, and they'd failed. They'd shown me their true faces, and those faces were ugly with greed and entitlement. Whatever came next, I was ready. The final confrontation came on a Friday afternoon in early December, and it came with lawyers. David Brennan called me at 2 p.m. Margaret, Daniel, and Jessica have filed a motion claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. They're requesting an emergency hearing to freeze your assets pending a full competency evaluation. I'd been expecting something like this, but the reality still made my stomach drop. Can they do that? They can try. The hearing is Monday at 9 a.m. We'll need to mount a vigorous defense. What do we need? Documentation, witnesses, and you'll need to be prepared to testify about your relationship with your children. It won't be pleasant. Nothing about this has been pleasant, I said. That weekend, I prepared. David arranged for my 3 physicians to provide affidavits. Linda, Maria, and James all agreed to testify about their relationships with me, to demonstrate that I was of sound mind and clear judgment. But the real weapon in our arsenal was something I'd been compiling for years without quite realizing it. I had kept everything, every dismissive email, every canceled visit, every birthday card that arrived 2 weeks late with a generic message, every social media post showing family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. I had screenshots, printed photos, a detailed timeline spanning 3 decades. David looked through the evidence with grim satisfaction. This is comprehensive, almost obsessively so. I'm not obsessive, I said. I'm a mother who kept hoping she was wrong. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The courthouse in Manhattan was imposing, all marble and authority. I wore my best clothes, still modest, still me, but professional. Daniel and Jessica were already there with their attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Holder, who had a reputation for aggressive family law litigation. When Jessica saw me, she actually tried to approach. Mom, please. We can still settle this privately. You don't want this to become public. Step back, please, David said firmly. No contact with my client. In the courtroom, we sat on opposite sides. I tried to catch Emma's eye. Daniel had brought my granddaughter, presumably to show the judge what I was depriving them of, but Veronica kept her close. The hearing began. Patricia Holder was good. She painted a picture of an elderly woman. I was 50, but she kept emphasizing advanced age, who'd been living in poverty despite having millions, who had suddenly and irrationally decided to give her fortune to virtual strangers, who was clearly not thinking clearly about her choices. Your Honor, Holder said, Mrs. Chen's behavior shows clear signs of cognitive decline and vulnerability to exploitation. She's been isolated from her family, living in a low-income neighborhood where she's formed inappropriate attachments to individuals who have obvious financial motivations. Objection, David said calmly. Counsel is testifying and making assumptions not in evidence, but Holder continued. She called Daniel to the stand first. I watched my son swear to tell the truth and then proceed to lie. He testified about how worried they'd been about me, how they'd tried to help over the years, but I'd refused their assistance, how they'd respected my independence even though it pained them to see me struggling, how this sudden revelation of wealth and the immediate decision to give it away had shocked them into realizing something was seriously wrong. He was convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him myself. Then came the cross-examination. "Mr. Chen," David began, "you testified that you tried to help your mother over the years. Can you give me specific examples?" "Well, we invited her to family events." "How many family events did your mother attend in the last 5 years?" Daniel hesitated. "I'd have to check the exact number." "Your mother kept records. She was invited to 3 events in 5 years. She attended all 3. At one of those events, your wife asked her to leave before certain guests arrived. Do you remember that?" Daniel's face reddened. "That was a misunderstanding. Do you remember calling your mother on her birthday last year?" "I'm sure I did." "Your phone records show no calls to your mother's number on that date, or the year before, or the year before that. In fact, the last time you personally called your mother was 14 months ago, and that call lasted 90 seconds. I watched Daniel realize that we had everything documented. Every lie he was about to tell could be disproven. "Mr. Chen, you testified that you respected your mother's independence. Is that why you had your secretary call her to invite her to her own 50th birthday party?" "I was busy. Too busy for a phone call to your mother, but not too busy to attend multiple social events that same week. We have your social media posts, Mr. Chen." Holder was on her feet. "Objection! This is harassment." "It's cross-examination, Your Honor," David said smoothly. "I'm testing the witness's credibility regarding his supposed concern for his mother." The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Martinez, nodded. "Overruled. Continue." By the time David was finished with Daniel, my son looked smaller somehow, diminished. Jessica's testimony was worse. She cried on the stand, talking about how much she loved me, how confused she was by my behavior. But when David produced emails she'd sent to friends describing me as an embarrassment and complaining about having to deal with me at holidays, her tears dried up fast. "Ms. Chen Morrison," David said, "did you write this email to your friend Stephanie describing your mother as basically homeless by choice and saying you were done pretending to care?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed. "That was taken out of context. What context makes that statement acceptable?" No answer. Then David called me to the stand. I testified calmly about my life, my choices, my reasons. I explained how Robert had asked me to test our children and what I'd discovered. I detailed 30 years of being pushed aside, dismissed, and forgotten. "Mrs. Chen," David asked, "do you believe you're of sound mind?" "Yes." "Do you understand the implications of your estate planning decisions?" "Completely. I'm giving my money to people who treated me with genuine kindness and respect. My children are angry because they assumed they'd inherit wealth they never knew existed. That's not diminished capacity. That's consequences." Finally, David produced our trump card. He called Maria to the stand. She was terrified. She'd never been in a courtroom before, but she answered honestly. "Did you know Mrs. Chen had money when you befriended her?" David asked. "No, I thought she was like me, just trying to get by." "Did you ever ask her for money?" "Never. She's the one who helped me. When my rent was short, when Carlos needed his therapy, she just helped. I didn't even know how to say thank you enough." "And when you learned about the inheritance, what did you feel?" "Scared," Maria said honestly, "and guilty, because I didn't earn it. I just did what friends do." Holder tried to trip her up on cross-examination, insinuating that Maria had been manipulating me all along. But Maria's genuine confusion and simple honesty were impossible to fake. When James testified about his friendship with me, describing how I'd sit with him when he was lonely, never expecting anything in return, I saw Judge Martinez's expression soften. The hearing lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Judge Martinez didn't even take a recess to deliberate. "I've heard enough," she said. "Mrs. Chen is clearly of sound mind and body. She's articulate, rational, and fully aware of her decisions. The fact that those decisions don't benefit her adult children doesn't constitute incapacity. This motion is denied." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. I looked across the courtroom at Daniel and Jessica. They looked back at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but genuine hatred. They'd lost and they knew it. And I felt nothing but cold, clear certainty that I'd made the right choice. The week after the hearing, David Brennan finalized the estate distribution. The money transferred smoothly into 3 separate trusts for Maria, James, and Linda. $50 million divided equally, managed by professional trustees, protected from taxes and legal challenges. It was done. But Daniel and Jessica weren't finished trying. On Thursday, I received a registered letter at my apartment. Inside was a typed note. "You've made your choice. Now live with it. You're no longer welcome in our lives or our children's lives. Consider yourself no longer part of this family." It was signed by both of them. I stared at that letter for a long time. They'd actually put it in writing. The thing they'd been doing quietly for years. The rejection was now official. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt liberated. I called David immediately. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I want to set up education trusts for my grandchildren. Emma, her brother, and Jessica's twins. Full college tuition, graduate school if they want it. But there's a condition. The money only becomes available when they turn 18, and only if they reach out to me first. The choice has to be theirs." "That's actually brilliant," David said. "You're protecting them from their parents' greed while giving them an escape route." Exactly. Within 2 weeks, those trusts were established. I had David send formal notification to Daniel and Jessica. The message was clear. I hadn't abandoned my grandchildren, even if their parents were trying to use them as weapons. Jessica called me screaming, "You can't do this. You can't manipulate our children with money." "I'm not manipulating anyone," I said calmly. "I'm giving them a choice their parents never gave them, the choice to know their grandmother without your permission." "We'll tell them not to contact you." "That's your choice," I said. "But when they turn 18, they'll have to decide whether your pride is worth a college education. I'm curious what they'll choose." She hung up on me. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. I'd kept working at the hospital laundry even after everything. I liked the work, liked my colleagues, liked having a routine. But word had gotten out about the inheritance and the court case. It was impossible to keep something like that completely private. Linda pulled me aside one morning. "Margaret, I need to tell you something. Daniel came to see me." My stomach dropped. "What?" "He showed up at my office last week, offered me money, a lot of money, if I'd give back the inheritance and testify that you'd been confused when you set it up." "What did you say?" Linda laughed, but there was anger in it. "I told him to get the hell out of my office before I called security. Then I documented everything and sent a report to David. Your son tried to bribe me, Margaret, in front of witnesses. Oh my God. It gets better. He also went to Maria's apartment, tried to intimidate her, said he'd report her to immigration unless she gave back the money." "Maria's a citizen," I said, horrified. "I know that. You know that. He was just trying to scare her. But Maria recorded the whole conversation on her phone." Linda smiled grimly. "David's already filed harassment complaints with the police. Your kids really aren't very smart, are they?" They weren't. In their desperation, Daniel and Jessica had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. David called a meeting with their attorney, Patricia Holder. I insisted on being there. We met in David's conference room. Holder looked exhausted. She'd probably realized her clients were making her job impossible. "My clients would like to propose a settlement," she began. "No," I said immediately. "Mrs. Chen, please listen." "No," I repeated. "Your clients tried to bribe and intimidate the beneficiaries of my estate. They've harassed my friends. They've filed frivolous legal motions. I'm not negotiating with them. I'm not compromising. I'm done." "Mrs. Chen, they're willing to apologize. They're willing to say words they don't mean in exchange for money," I said. "That's not an apology. That's a transaction." David laid several folders on the table. "Ms. Holder, these contain documentation of your client's harassment, the bribes, the threats, the attempted intimidation. We're prepared to pursue criminal charges if they contact Mrs. Chen or her beneficiaries again." Holder opened one folder, read for a moment, and her face went pale. "I'll need to speak with my clients." "Do that," David said, "and make sure they understand. It's over. They've lost. If they continue this behavior, they won't just lose their inheritance. They'll lose their reputations and possibly their freedom." 2 days later, I received a final communication from Daniel and Jessica, delivered through their attorney, as required by the restraining order David had filed. It was a cold, formal acknowledgement that they would cease all contact with me and withdraw any further legal challenges. There was no apology, no recognition of wrongdoing, just a terse legal document protecting them from consequences. I signed it without hesitation. That evening, I invited Maria, James, and Linda to my apartment. We ordered Chinese food and opened a bottle of champagne that had been sitting in my cupboard since Robert died. "To family," James said, raising his glass. "The real kind." "To Margaret," Maria added, tears in her eyes, "who taught me that kindness is worth more than money." "To justice," Linda said firmly, "and to not letting bastards win." We drank and laughed and talked until late into the night. For the first time in 30 years, I felt completely, genuinely happy. My children were out of my life, but I'd gained a family that actually deserved the name. And that, I realized, was the best inheritance of all. 6 months later, my life had transformed in ways I never anticipated. I'd finally moved, not to somewhere expensive, but to a better apartment in the same Queens neighborhood. 2 bedrooms instead of 1, with actual sunlight and a small balcony where I could grow herbs. Maria and her son Carlos lived right downstairs. James had taken an apartment in the same building. We'd become the kind of found family that actually functions. Maria had quit both her jobs. With the inheritance properly managed, she had financial security for the first time in her life. She'd enrolled in nursing school, something she'd always dreamed of but never thought possible. "I start clinical rotations next month," she told me over coffee one morning, her eyes bright with excitement. "Miss Margaret, I'm going to be a nurse, a real nurse." "You were always real," I said. "Now you just have the credentials to prove it." James had used part of his inheritance to start a program for homeless veterans, working with a local VA hospital. He'd found purpose again after years of just existing. "These guys remind me of myself," he told me. "After my wife died, I was just drifting. Your friendship gave me a reason to stay anchored. Now I can do that for others." Linda had stayed at her hospital job, but the security of the inheritance meant she could advocate for workers without fear of retaliation. She'd already negotiated better wages for the entire laundry staff and improved safety protocols. "Money doesn't change who I am," she'd said when I asked why she kept working, "but it changes what I can do. Now I can fight without worrying about feeding my kids." As for me, I'd finally started living, really living. I took an art class at the community center. I volunteered at a literacy program. I traveled, just small trips at first, but seeing places Robert and I had always talked about visiting. I was 50 years old, healthy, financially secure, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. I should have been completely happy. But sometimes, late at night, I wondered about my grandchildren. Emma would be 7 now. The twins would be 5. I'd missed so much of their lives. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Margaret Chen?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes." "This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm a social worker with Child Protective Services. I'm calling about your grandchildren." My blood went cold. "What's wrong? Are they hurt?" "No, they're physically fine, but I'm afraid there's been an incident. Your son Daniel is currently under investigation for financial fraud. His wife, Veronica, was arrested last week for embezzlement from her company. The children have been placed with emergency foster care." The room spun. "Oh my God! We're looking for family placement options. You're listed as their grandmother. Would you be willing to undergo a home evaluation?" Would I be willing? The next few weeks were a blur of background checks, home visits, and legal paperwork. David helped me navigate the system. Maria, James, and Linda all provided character references. The details of Daniel's collapse emerged slowly. He'd been running a Ponzi scheme through his law practice, desperate to maintain the lifestyle he'd built. When my inheritance disappeared, his house of cards had crumbled. Veronica's embezzlement was separate but equally devastating. She'd been stealing from her employer for years. Jessica and Todd weren't in legal trouble, but they'd lost everything in a bad investment scheme. Something Todd had assured everyone was guaranteed returns. They'd mortgaged their house, maxed out their credit cards, and lost it all. The last I heard, they were living in a rental apartment in New Jersey, both working retail jobs. My children had destroyed themselves through greed and poor choices, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a distant sadness for the people they could have been. But when CPS brought Emma and her brother to meet me, I felt everything. Emma was cautious at first. She remembered me, but years of her parents' poison had left her uncertain. "Daddy said you were mean," she whispered. "He said you didn't love us." I knelt down to her level. "Your daddy was wrong. I love you very much. I always have. But your parents wouldn't let me see you." "Why not?" "Because they were angry with me." "But Emma, that was between us adults. It was never your fault." Over the following weeks, Emma and her brother, Matthew, I learned, I'd never even known his middle name, began to trust me. They met Maria's son, Carlos, and started playing together. James taught them card games. Linda brought her grandchildren over for play dates. They were healing, and so was I. The irony wasn't lost on me. My children's greed had ultimately given me what I'd wanted most, a chance to know my grandchildren, a chance to show them what real family looked like. 9 months after the CPS call, the adoption was finalized. Emma and Matthew were officially mine. We celebrated with our extended family, the real one. Maria made a cake. James brought balloons. Linda organized games. Emma hugged me tight. "I'm glad we live with you, Grandma. This feels like home." "It is home," I said, "for as long as you want it to be." That night, after the children were asleep, I stood on my balcony looking at the Queens skyline. My life hadn't turned out anything like I'd planned. It had turned out better. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Jessica were living with the consequences of their choices. They'd lost their money, their reputations, their freedom, and ultimately, their children. And I'd gained everything that actually mattered. So here I am, 60 years old now, raising 2 grandchildren I thought I'd lost forever. My children's greed destroyed them, but it gave me a second chance at the family I always wanted. Maria, James, and Linda are thriving. Emma and Matthew are happy and loved. And me, I finally understand what wealth really means. It's not money. It's being surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not what you have. What would you do if your family only valued you for your money? Leave a comment below. I read them all. And if this story resonated with you, there are more like it on my channel. Real stories about real people making difficult choices. Thank you for listening to mine.